Hi, I'm Tanya. I drove home to surprise my husband with a 200K gift, hoping it'd fix what we kept pretending wasn't broken. But the moment I stepped through the door, I heard my sister's voice, giggling, right before he called her babe. That word didn't just stop me. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. Now I'm left asking, how long have they been building a new life, with pieces stolen from mine? There was still frost on the windows when I pulled the cover off the car. The lake had that still, silvery surface it always did in March. Cold, unmoving, like it hadn't decided yet whether winter was truly over. I'd washed the car the night before, filled the tank, wiped the leather seats with care. It gleamed like a promise. My father once told me, when in doubt, give generously. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. That was him. Practical. Grounded. Generous to a fault. I wasn't sure if he meant that about people like Rex, men who forgot birthdays and came home too late, but I decided it still applied. The car had been part of my inheritance after Dad passed. A collector's piece, valued near 200 grand. I had thought about selling it, even considered donating it, but something inside me believed it could still be a bridge. Rex loved that car. Maybe if I gave it to him, not just handed him keys, but offered the gesture, it would speak louder than our exhausted conversations ever had. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was an offering, a last-ditch effort to salvage what was left between us. I didn't wrap it, didn't write a note. That felt too desperate. I'd just pull into the driveway, walk in with the spare key in hand and say, "Let's take a drive." Simple. Human. One more try. He hadn't responded to my last few texts, but I assumed he was just in one of his brooding phases. This would be my way of saying, I still believe we can fix this. Not through therapy or long-winded talks, just motion, movement, together. As I turned down the drive, gravel crunching under tires, my stomach began its usual tightrope act, hope pulling one end, dread tugging the other. His car was already there, parked slightly off-center. Typical. I pulled in behind it, cut the engine, and sat for a moment, adjusting my coat sleeve like it mattered. The house looked still, too still. Blinds drawn halfway, kitchen light off despite it being nearly 10. I reached for my bag, then paused. Should I knock? It was my home too, after all. My name still on the deed. But something made me hesitate, just for a breath, like I was intruding. Like I might be walking into something I wasn't supposed to see. I unlocked the door slowly. The doorknob was colder than usual. Inside, the air was thick, not with scent, not with smoke, just heavy, as if silence had mass, and I was carrying it on my back. At first, nothing, just the quiet creak of the floor as I stepped in. Then, voices, low, muffled, coming from the hallway, from the bedroom. I froze, halfway to setting my bag down. His voice, playful, that laugh he hadn't used with me in months. Then hers, light, flirty, unmistakable. "I missed you too, babe," she said. Mercedes. It took a second. My body reacted before my brain did. My grip tightened around the house key, so hard the jagged edge pressed into my palm. My breath snagged, suspended between denial and certainty. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My ears took over, painting the scene I refused to walk in on. Their voices bounced off walls I'd painted myself last fall. I heard a thud, maybe the bed, then a long pause, followed by a shared laugh. My own heartbeat was louder than their whispers now. I didn't drop the keys. I didn't scream. I didn't even walk toward the door. I just stood there, absorbing the betrayal like it had a physical form. My legs finally unlocked. Quietly, I stepped backward, rounding the corner into the kitchen. I needed air, space, a moment. That's when I saw it. His phone sat charging on the counter, its screen glowing with a new message. I didn't intend to look, but it lit up again, bold white against the black wallpaper. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to feel you again. M." My stomach flipped. The M might as well have been written in red ink. There it was. Confirmation. No room for excuses. No hiding behind half-truths or blurred timelines. I didn't touch the phone. Didn't delete the message. That would have made it mine to carry. I wasn't cleaning up after this. I turned around slowly, letting the shock sink deep, not pushing it away. I needed it to stay. Needed to remember exactly how it felt. How cold the countertop was under my fingertips. How the overhead light buzzed slightly when the fridge clicked on. My feet moved again, this time with purpose. I left the way I came in. Door open just wide enough not to creak. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. A patch of light landed directly on the hood of the car I was going to give him. I stood there for a second, just staring. That car had taken my father decades to restore. He once told me, "Value is what you protect when no one's looking." I almost gave it to someone who didn't even glance back when I walked in the door. Walking back to my car took less than a minute, but it felt like an hour. Every step, a thought surfaced. The late nights Rex said he needed for work, the times Mercedes asked questions about our fights, the way she suddenly started wearing that same shade of lipstick I used to love. In hindsight, it was all there, hints dropped like breadcrumbs. But I'd been too tired, too hopeful, too married to the idea of salvaging something that had long since sunk. I got into my car, not bothering to wipe the windshield or adjust the rearview mirror. I didn't cry. There was no grand release, no shaking hands or sobs, just a clarity I hadn't known I needed. What hurt wasn't just the affair. It was the intimacy, the comfort in her laugh, the way his voice sounded like it used to when he was still mine. I pulled away from the house, the tires rolling slowly over the gravel. My eyes stayed forward. I didn't look back at the porch, at the window, at the car that now felt like a joke. I drove. Not to my sister's. Not to my mother's. Certainly not back to the life I thought I was fixing. I drove because it was the only thing I could do with the energy still humming in my chest. This wasn't collapse. This was preparation. I didn't drive far. The house was still behind me, standing in the same place it had been for over a decade, but it felt like something had shifted beneath it, beneath me. I pulled off the road at the edge of the lake, a small overlook where the wind came in clean and uninterrupted. The water was still, quiet, and it mirrored the mountains in that eerie, perfect way, a place that looked peaceful but could drown you all the same. I sat there, engine ticking, hands still wrapped tight around the steering wheel. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was processing, like a machine caught mid-reboot. I remembered a line my therapist told me years ago. People don't break in a moment. They crack over time, and the wrong thing just happens to fall through. I'd felt cracks before. Small fractures when Rex stopped making eye contact. Hairline lines when Mercedes started borrowing things and not returning them. But now it wasn't a crack. It was collapse. Only I was still standing. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't call a friend. I turned back around, drove back to the house like I was going to check the mail. No one needed to know I had been gone. I didn't plan to yell. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted confirmation, proof. A clear picture that this was not just in my head. I parked a block down and walked up the back way, through the alley by the fence. I knew Rex rarely locked the back door when he was home. Habit, one of many that would cost him today. Inside, it smelled like rosemary and wine. There was music playing, my playlist, the one I had made last Thanksgiving when we still pretended to enjoy each other. Nina Simone's voice filled the dining room, and something inside me clenched. I stepped forward slowly, careful not to let the floor creak under my weight. What I saw made my breath catch. The dining table was set. Not just any setting. My grandmother's china, the one I only brought out for holidays. The napkin rings I bought in Napa. My vintage wine glasses, filled and gleaming under soft candlelight, candles I placed in that candelabra just last week. Rex stood at the end of the table, laughing, pouring wine into the second glass. Across from him, Mercedes. She was wearing my cashmere cardigan, the one I thought I'd misplaced after our last laundry day. Her hair was up the same way I used to wear it when Rex and I first got married. And then she laughed, loud, unbothered. "I love it here," she said, stretching out in her chair like she belonged. "It just feels like home." Home. I didn't make a sound. I didn't step into the light. I stood in the shadows, absorbing the performance. My marriage, my space, my things. The lamb. They were eating my lamb recipe. I had used it every anniversary. The same wine, the same dishes. It was like they'd rehearsed a scene from my life, cut me out of the frame, and decided to keep filming. I raised my phone and took a photo. Just one. The table, the two of them, the way his hand brushed hers when he passed the salad. Then I stepped back. Out the door. No sound. No witness. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat in my car outside a diner until the sun rose, then drove home once I was sure they were gone. Workday habits. Mercedes would be at her temp office job. Rex would be at his firm. Predictable. Routine. The house was empty, but not hollow. I started in the bathroom. My perfume bottle was nearly empty, but I hadn't worn it in weeks. The toothbrush beside mine was wet. A faint pink stain on the handle. Not mine. In the sink, my favorite mug. Lipstick on the rim. Deep red. I haven't worn lipstick in months. I walked into the bedroom. The books on my nightstand had been rearranged. The throw blanket I kept at the foot of the bed had been moved. On the vanity, my hairbrush, thick with auburn strands. Mercedes color. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I moved slowly, documenting. In the guest room, her room, I opened her overnight bag. A velvet pouch slipped from the side pocket. Inside, my bracelet, the real one, the one Dad gave me when I graduated law school. I had thought I'd lost it. I even asked her about it once. She said she hadn't seen it. I sat on the edge of the bed and let that moment settle. She hadn't just taken my place in his life. She'd taken pieces of mine, one by one. Objects, memories, spaces. She hadn't become someone else. She had become me. In the closet, I noticed a space between my shoes, my blue heels, gone. Another item she used to admire. I stood there for a while, not moving, not breathing, just listening to the silence of a home I no longer recognized. This wasn't grief. This wasn't heartbreak. This was war. Not the kind you scream about, not the kind you fight with fists, the kind you win with precision. I pulled out my phone, created a new folder. Proof of substitution. Began snapping pictures. The lipstick-stained mug, the perfume bottle, the bracelet, the arrangement of the table in the dining room, my cardigan in the laundry basket. Worn, not washed. I backed everything up to cloud storage, created a timeline, labeled every file. I wasn't going to confront. I was going to corner. That night, I locked the bedroom door for the first time since we bought the house. I kept the hallway lights on. The overhead fan spun in slow circles above me, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I scrolled through old photos, ones from when we were kids. There was one of us, me and Mercedes, at age 14. We were standing side by side in matching denim jackets. I remembered she begged Mom to buy the same one I had. I let her. I thought it was cute back then, harmless. Now, looking at it, it made my skin crawl. She's always wanted what I had. And now, she thought she had taken all of it. The husband, the house, the rituals, even the clothes. I whispered into the dark, she won't take this without a fight. Because this time, I wasn't giving anything away. I barely slept. Even with the bedroom door locked and the hallway lights on, the house felt foreign, like someone had moved the walls slightly, enough that everything seemed off. The mattress didn't hold me the way it used to. The air felt too still. Every creak, every shadow, sounded like confirmation that I didn't belong there anymore. Around 5, I gave up pretending to rest. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweatshirt, and padded down the hallway barefoot. The hardwood was cold, grounding. I made myself a cup of black tea, not for comfort, but to stay sharp. I pulled up my phone and started scrolling through the journal app I hadn't touched in months. Most entries were short, one-liners, snippets of frustration. But they painted a timeline more honest than anything Rex had offered in the past year. One entry from 6 months ago. He says he needs space, but never offers me any. Another, Mercedes asked what our first date was like. Then she made that exact meal 2 weeks later. And then the quote I saved from an old sociology professor during undergrad, "Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in who controls the narrative." I looked around at my home and realized that it wasn't mine anymore, not emotionally, It had become a stage, and somewhere along the way, I had been written out of the script. I opened my laptop, logged into our smart home system. When we first installed the cameras, it was just for pet sitting and porch security. But I'd quietly upgraded the subscription after Rex left town last fall for a retreat. Something about the way he packed told me he wasn't going alone. The feed loaded, living room, kitchen, front porch. I clicked into archived footage from 2 nights ago. It started innocently enough, just background noise, but at 8:42 p.m., Mercedes appeared, barefoot, swaying gently in the kitchen. She poured wine, my favorite glass, the one with the faint crack near the stem that I'd never had the heart to throw away. The camera angle caught her from the side as she took a sip, looked around like she owned the space. Then Rex walked in. He moved behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and whispered, "My piece." I paused the video, stared, hit play again, watched it a second time. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just hit download and saved it to a folder named Documented Truth. Transferred it to a private drive and labeled each file with timestamps. Kitchen 3:14, 8:42 p.m. Another clip, Mercedes checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. The same mirror I used every morning for 12 years. She tilted her head, fixed her collar, my old cardigan, and smiled. I labeled that one, Living Room 3:15, 9:38 p.m. Click, save, repeat. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was the archivist of my own erasure. The next morning, I went through the usual motions: shower, coffee, a quick email check, then got dressed and drove out to my mother's farmhouse. It was Sunday, and like every second Sunday of the month, there was family lunch. I hadn't missed one in years, and I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of my absence. The gravel crackled under my tires as I pulled in. The place looked the same as ever. Faded porch chairs, bird feeder swinging in the breeze, windows that hadn't been washed since before Christmas. Inside, laughter floated from the dining room. I pasted on a smile, set my purse down near the entry, and walked in like nothing had changed. Mercedes was already there, of course. Sitting next to my mother, practically curled into Rex's side. Her voice was brighter than usual, forced in that way people speak when they know an audience is watching. "I mean, remember when Tanya used to cry every time Dad forgot her birthday?" she said suddenly, mid-laugh. The table erupted into giggles. My aunt clapped her hands. "She was always so sensitive." I blinked. That never happened. It was Mercedes who cried when Mom missed her piano recital. I remembered standing in the doorway, watching her sob into Dad's shirt. But now, that memory had been reassigned. I looked to Mom. She was laughing too. No hesitation. I felt like I was watching a scene unfold in a language I almost understood, but couldn't speak anymore. They weren't just rewriting my marriage. They were editing my childhood. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I took another bite of potato salad and chewed slowly. In my mind, I opened a new tab on my phone and typed, "Memory switch, birthday story, false attribution, folder, emotional gaslight." Back at home later that day, I made a timeline, not of events, but of replacements. July. Rex forgets our anniversary. Blames work. Mercedes sends him a gift the same day. August. Mercedes asks to borrow my blazer for an interview. It never comes back. October. My father's cufflinks disappear. Show up in Rex's drawer. I printed screen captures, labeled folders, dated everything. I thought of how easy it is for families to believe the convenient version of events. If the lie is gentle enough, people prefer it. I no longer needed to argue. I needed to preserve. That night, I opened my closet and pulled up the floorboard near the back wall. It was a trick Dad taught me when I was 15, after I found Mom reading my diary. Inside, I slid in a manila envelope, labeled in permanent marker, "In case I disappear." Inside, printed screenshots, dated footage. The receipt from when the bracelet I thought I lost was charged to our joint account by Mercedes. On top, a sticky note in red ink. "Truth always leaks. Start here." I replaced the board, pushed the shoes back in front of it, and stood up slowly. There was no dramatic music. No thunderclap. Just me, breathing evenly. Tomorrow I'd smile, I'd bake muffins, ask how work was going, compliment Mercedes on her hair, and while they rehearsed their next scene, I'd be backstage, studying the script. By the time Sunday rolled around, the dread in my stomach had shifted from sharp to dull, like a toothache you get used to. That kind of pain that becomes part of your rhythm. I had agreed to go to lunch at my mother's house, not to play nice, but because I needed to see how far the rot had spread. It was a warm April afternoon, the kind that tries to convince you everything's fine just because the sky's blue. But the air outside didn't match what I knew I was walking into. I parked down the driveway, behind two other cars I recognized. Celine's little red SUV and my husband's new truck, the one he claimed was a company lease. I ran my fingers through my hair, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and forced a polite smile onto my face. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Not hostility, not outright coldness, rehearsal. The dining room had been dressed like a stage, checkered tablecloth, my grandmother's lace runner, carefully arranged flowers. It was curated hospitality, the kind that says we're one big happy family if you don't look too close. Celine was already seated, naturally, to the right of my mother. Rex sat beside her, his hand resting comfortably on the back of her chair. I was directed, with barely a glance, to a seat at the far end of the table, opposite from everyone of consequence. "Hey, Tanya," my aunt offered, with a weak smile that barely reached her eyes. "Glad you made it," Celine chirped, her voice all frosting, no cake. I just nodded, taking my seat like I hadn't noticed the distance. Like I hadn't seen the shift in proximity and power dynamics unfold before the first course was even served. Lunch began with idle chatter, local news, weather complaints, and my mother's new lavender bushes. I kept my eyes on the table, using the act of buttering bread to avoid unnecessary eye contact. Then Rex stood, wineglass in hand. "I just want to say," he started, the room quieting with a familiar clink of stemware, "it's good to have us all together again. There's nothing like family, and being with the woman you love." He turned, raised his glass slightly toward Celine. "To you, babe." He froze. Celine blinked, her smile faltering. A beat passed before he cleared his throat, stumbled. "I mean, Tanya, of course. To Tanya." Awkward chuckles broke around the table like a weak dam. My uncle reached for more potatoes. My mother made a noise that was supposed to be a laugh. Celine looked down and sipped her wine like nothing happened. And me? I sat perfectly still. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I didn't let my face change. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a visible reaction. My mother leaned over her plate, smiled at me like we were sharing some matriarchal joke. "It's hard to keep up with strong women in the family," she said, raising her glass. That's when I caught it. Celine. Behind the rim of her wineglass, smirking, small, deliberate. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that it wasn't a slip. It was a revelation. He didn't say the wrong name. He said the name that sat in his chest now. But I didn't. I just nodded once, lifted my glass, and drank. We moved through the meal in artificial harmony, roast chicken, lemon asparagus, and rice pilaf. Celine passed the gravy like she passed off stolen rolls, smoothly, as if it always belonged to her. Then, as we cleared the dishes, my mother clapped her hands once. "I want to do something special today," she said, standing. The room hushed again, all eyes on her. "I've been thinking about legacy and what it means to pass things down," she continued, "and I've decided it's time to hand this off to the next generation." She reached into a drawer near the buffet and pulled out a small navy blue box. My chest tightened. It was the ring box. The one that had held Grandma's sapphire, an heirloom passed to my mother with the explicit promise it would go to me one day. I had cleaned it, held it in my palm, prayed with it the night Grandma died. It was supposed to be mine. My mother turned, walked right past me, and stopped in front of Celine. "I think this suits your hand better," she said, placing it gently into her palm. Celine gasped, covered her mouth, then let out a dramatic, "Oh my God!" like a girl at prom getting a corsage. Rex clapped softly. My hands gripped the underside of the table, nails biting into the wood. The room applauded. I saw it in their faces, the satisfaction, the unity, the rewritten narrative. I wasn't the loyal daughter. I wasn't the eldest who held on to family traditions. I was the background character whose story had been erased, rewritten, and cast aside. In my mind, I returned to the memory. Grandma lying in her hospice bed, her frail hand closing around mine. "This is yours one day, Tanya. Only yours," she had whispered, breath shaky but deliberate. Now Celine wore it. On a hand that never wiped our grandmother's brow, never sat through those final hospital visits. On a hand that mimicked everything mine once did, except bleed for this family. I smiled. Tightly. Hollowly. "Thank you, Mom," I said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "It's a beautiful choice." "Oh, I just thought," she started, but I didn't let her finish. "It's perfect," I interrupted. "Truly." Under the table, Rex's hand slid to Celine's shoulder. Squeezed. That did it. I excused myself to the bathroom. Inside, I locked the door and leaned against the sink, eyes fixed on the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. "They're writing me out while I'm still breathing," I said softly. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started typing. Event. April lunch. Public humiliation. Symbolic dispossession. Psychological inversion. They're gaslighting via tradition. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I smiled. Not the kind that masks pain, but the kind that understands its own temperature, its direction. I flushed the toilet to keep up appearances, washed my hands slowly, then rejoined the table. There were slices of pie being passed around, chocolate and lemon meringue. I declined. "I should get going," I said, grabbing my purse. "Oh," my mother said, clearly caught off guard. "So soon?" "I have something to finish writing," I replied. Celine tilted her head. "Working on a new story?" I smiled at her. Full, warm, fake. Something like that. As I leaned in to hug my mother goodbye, I whispered into her ear, just loud enough to stick. "You may have given her the ring, but I carry the memory, and I remember everything." Her hand tightened slightly on my back. Then I let go, walked out the door, and didn't look back. The Monday after the lunch felt different, not because anything had been said, but because of everything that hadn't. There was no explosion, no confrontation, no slammed doors, just small movements, adjustments, shifts that marked the beginning of something I hadn't named yet, but knew was inevitable. I started with the master bedroom. Rex was at work, Celine gone for the day, probably sipping overpriced tea at that cafe she pretended to work remotely from. I pulled the duvet back with care, smoothed the edges, and began removing my things. The drawer where I kept my journals, emptied, my perfume collection, packed, even the half-used ones. My earrings from the night we got engaged, gone from the dresser and into a velvet pouch. I didn't do it with anger. I moved like someone clearing out a hotel room after checkout. In the bathroom, I replaced the hand towels, mine, embroidered with the initials TH, with generic beige ones. I took my toothbrush, left his, switched out the monogrammed bath mat for a plain one. It wasn't about hiding. It was about reclaiming space. Rex would notice. He always noticed when the lighting changed or when the spice rack wasn't organized alphabetically. But he wouldn't say anything, not at first. That was his way. Passive until cornered. As I worked, my mind repeated a line I had once read in an old war memoir. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is a woman who's stopped asking for peace. I logged into my private email, reviewed the folder I had titled simply, Proof. Inside were labeled subfolders, video clips, photos, financial records. Each one documented a shift, a theft, a betrayal. Nothing dramatic, just undeniable. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the guest room, picking up clothes to do laundry. Her bag sat partially unzipped on the floor. Something velvet peeked out from the side pocket. Curiosity didn't drive me. Certainty did. I knelt, reached in, and pulled it out. a small pouch. Inside, my bracelet, the one my grandmother gave me on my wedding day, gold filigree, small sapphire in the center. I remembered the weight of it, the way her wrinkled fingers had fastened it onto my wrist, whispering, "This will keep your name close." I thought I'd lost it, searched drawers, asked Celine casually months ago. She said, "I think you left it at Mom's." I'd believed her, or pretended to. I had given her a bracelet too, similar, but not the same. Hers was lighter, newer. The difference was subtle unless you knew what to look for. She'd taken mine, passed it off as hers, and no one noticed. That was the worst part. It didn't take effort. She didn't have to manipulate. She just had to exist in proximity, and people filled in the blanks. They assumed. They replaced. I sat on the edge of the bed, the pouch still open in my palm, and let the realization sit with me. It wasn't about jewelry. It was about rewriting ownership, quietly, confidently, like everything else. I didn't cry. I documented. Took a picture, uploaded it to my drive, added the caption, "Recovered heirloom bracelet, misattributed for 9 months." The following morning, I woke early, made coffee, let the silence expand. At 9:05, I set my phone to record, then placed it behind the potted plant in the living room, a voice-activated app I had downloaded weeks ago, buried inside a folder called Home Projects. I left the house at 9:30, yoga mat in the back seat, drive-through coffee in hand. I looped around the block 3 times, then parked at the library and waited. At 11:17, I returned, downloaded the file, played it. It started simple. Rex coming in, chatting about something mundane. Then Mercedes. Their voices grew softer, more familiar. Rex laughed. "She still thinks we're helping her feel less alone." Mercedes chuckled. "She always needs to believe there's a plan." Then Rex again, lower, almost thoughtful. "Truth is, I feel more married to you than I ever did to her." There was silence. Then Celine's voice, cool and amused. "That's because I know how to play her better than she knows how to protect herself." My fingers didn't shake. My stomach didn't twist. I just paused, rewound, played it again, and transcribed every word. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook I hadn't opened since my father's funeral. On the first page, in bold marker, I wrote, "I've been erased. I'm writing myself back in." Below that, bullet points. Isolate finances. Freeze joint cards. Secure passwords. Document everything. Get legal counsel discreetly. I created a new email address under a different last name. Booked a consultation with a local estate attorney, someone who didn't know Rex, didn't know my family, didn't owe anyone anything. Her name was Angela. She had a voice like gravel and steel and said things like, "You're going to need to move quiet but firm." We met Wednesday. I handed her a thumb drive, organized with folders and tags. She didn't blink, just said, "Let's begin." By Friday, I'd ordered 2 more audio recorders, one to keep in the car, one to plant near the back hallway. I wasn't paranoid. I was precise. They had gambled on my decency, my politeness, my need to keep things together. But now I wasn't trying to keep anything. I was dismantling it all. Saturday morning, I sat down with my laptop and sent myself an email. Subject: Final Insurance. Inside was a link to a password-protected folder in the cloud and instructions on what to do if I ever went missing. No drama, just protocol. As I closed the screen, the kitchen door opened. Rex walked in, loosened his tie, sniffed the air like he expected dinner. "Everything okay?" he asked, casual, like he hadn't just tossed me aside for my own sister. I smiled, not with my mouth, with my posture. "Perfect," I said, because I meant it. There was a peculiar stillness in the house that morning, not the comforting kind, but the kind that follows a storm no one admits happened. I got up early, not out of anxiety, but because stillness was easier to manage than noise. Rex had been out late again. Something about a board meeting, another late dinner with investors. He left no note, just a cologne trail that didn't match the scent I gave him last Christmas. I didn't care to ask anymore. I wasn't documenting his whereabouts. I was documenting consequences. I sipped my coffee slowly, the ceramic mug warm against my hands. Then I pulled open the bottom drawer of the office filing cabinet, the one labeled Tanya Legal. It was my little fortress of paper, copies of tax returns, bank statements, vehicle titles. Dad had taught me to never rely on digital storage alone. Paper doesn't lie, he used to say. It just cuts slower. I sorted through documents until I found the envelope containing the title for the car. My car. The one Dad left me, the one I almost gifted Rex. My chest tightened as I unfolded the form, feeling the soft rustle of betrayal long before I read the fine print. The title had two names on it now. Mine and Mercedes. I blinked, rechecked, thought maybe my eyes were tired. But there it was. My signature, just slightly off. The loop on the T too tight, the A not quite closed. I sat back and stared at the page like it had teeth. It hit me all at once. 3 weeks ago, Rex had handed me a stack of insurance documents, claiming our car insurance needed updating. Just a few things to keep the rates low, he'd said. I hadn't read past the first page. They didn't steal the car. They made me sign it over. I snapped a photo of the document and uploaded it to my secure folder. Then I logged onto the DMV site. The ownership database confirmed what I feared. I was now only a partial owner, despite the car being solely under my name for years. The air around me felt thinner, more dangerous. This wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. I called the DMV and made an appointment. Then I called a forensic handwriting expert. I wasn't going to ask for the truth anymore. I was going to prove it. Just as I was about to shut my laptop, the mail slot clinked open in the hallway. I stood up, heart already picking up speed. There was a plain envelope from Idaho State Credit Union. No return address label, no marketing fluff. Just my name typed on the front. Inside, "Thank you for your recent application. Your request for a $40,000 personal loan has been approved. Funds available immediately." My stomach dropped so fast it almost made a sound. I had never applied for a loan. Not recently. Not ever. I picked up the phone and dialed the number listed on the letter. A woman named Kim answered with a chipper voice. I gave her my name, birth date, address. "Yes, we have you here," she said. "Loan was processed under joint authorization. Final confirmation sent to your email on file." "Which email is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She read it aloud. I didn't recognize it. "Can I confirm your joint applicant's name?" I asked. She hesitated. "I'm only allowed to say the first initial, R. Rex. Of course." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. My hands moved automatically, grabbing my father's old leather-bound notebook, flipping to a blank page. I began writing. Property title. Car. Forged. Loan. $40,000. Unauthorized email. Identity. Compromised. Joint accounts. Review. Access. Passwords. Change. All. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was financial assault. And I'd walked right into it, pen in hand. I looked at the legal folder again, then at my phone. I needed backup. The next morning, I called Carol, a private estate attorney who had once handled my father's business affairs. Her office was discreet, tucked behind a law firm in downtown Coeur d'Alene. I drove there with every document, every photo, every folder. I even brought the bracelet. Inside, Carol greeted me with that dry voice I remembered. She looked over the files quietly, pausing only to raise an eyebrow at the loan documents. "This isn't a marital dispute," she said, finally. "This is identity fraud, and you need to treat it as such." She didn't sugarcoat. "Do not confront them directly. Do not raise alarms. Quietly freeze your credit, separate your finances, and stop using shared devices. Start moving assets out of joint accounts. Now." I nodded, more than ready to comply. By late afternoon, I had closed 2 credit cards, opened a new bank account under a fresh alias, and set new passcodes on every device I owned. I reset all my passwords: banking, utilities, email, even my Spotify account. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with a notepad beside me and wrote out every password by hand, storing them in a fireproof safe. I deleted old messages from Celine and Rex, backed up files to 2 encrypted drives, and stored them in separate locations. I wasn't paranoid, I was methodical. At 10:42 p.m., I heard the front door open. Rex walked in, loosened his tie, and tossed his keys in the bowl by the door. He didn't say anything, just moved around the kitchen like it was still his. Then I saw it. He left a note on the counter, folded neatly. My name written in his handwriting. I unfolded it. Dinner tomorrow. Just us. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it up, walked over to the shredder in my office, and fed it in. Strip by strip, it disappeared. I walked back into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the clock. "Sure," I said aloud. "Let's eat." I turned to my laptop, opened the encrypted folder, and created a new file, Dinner Trap Plan. The invitation was handwritten this time. A folded note left beside my laptop, its edges sharp, pen strokes deliberate, almost gentle. Dinner tomorrow? Just us. Rex's handwriting hadn't changed in 15 years, but something about the way he wrote my name, curved too neatly, like he was trying to remember how to spell it, made the ink feel colder. By Thursday afternoon, I had already run 3 separate background tasks on the living room recorder, updated my encrypted cloud storage, and rechecked the cameras embedded in the bookshelf. I wasn't worried about what they would say tonight. I was counting on it. I dressed plainly, gray slacks, ironed to a crease, black blouse, no jewelry. My hair was pulled back into a clean bun, not polished, controlled. Dad used to say, "When you dine with snakes, wear boots and bring your own knife." I arrived in the kitchen 15 minutes early to set up the table. They wouldn't suspect anything odd. I'd always been the one to manage meals. But I noticed small differences. My mug, gone from its hook. In its place, a lemon-printed one I didn't recognize. The rosemary candles I always used for dinner had been replaced with citrus-scented ones, Celine's preference. I placed my phone carefully beneath the shelf next to the trailing pothos plant, recording, discreetly angled toward the dining table. Then I waited. The front door opened right on time. Rex entered first, followed by Celine, dressed in a soft blue wrap dress I hadn't seen before, likely borrowed or claimed from my closet without notice. They laughed lightly, as if the house didn't belong to me, as if I were the guest. Dinner began with baked salmon and asparagus, something I'd prepared earlier to eliminate any excuse for suspicion. We passed dishes, traded obligatory compliments, made small talk about community events and rising property taxes. Then, mid-bite, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. A text from my cousin's wife. Just one line, "Is this you?" And a link. I clicked without thinking. TikTok. The video opened to Celine's face, soft lighting, music playing faintly in the background. Her voice, calm but calculated. You know, sometimes family members don't realize how toxic they are until it's too late. Some people just ruin every holiday. It's like they need drama to breathe. My jaw didn't tighten, my hand didn't shake. I simply tapped Save Video and sent a screenshot to my legal archive under the label Defamation Social Evidence. Across the table, Celine was buttering her roll. I looked at her like I was studying an insect through glass. "How's work been?" I asked, my tone light. "Oh, the usual," she said. "Deadlines, emails, you know." Rex chimed in. "She's been doing great, honestly, holding everything together." I smiled faintly. "Sounds like you've got a good support system." Celine smiled back, her teeth gleaming. "I've always been the one to hold things together." The wine tasted metallic. She passed me the potatoes like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just broadcast a thinly veiled attack to over 200,000 followers. I didn't argue. Silence is a strategist's best friend. Dinner crawled forward. Forks tapped porcelain. The rhythm of shared betrayal played out with every polite chuckle. I knew they thought I was withdrawing again, dissociating maybe. Let them believe it. When the meal ended, I stood to clear the plates. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Sarah. My old bridesmaid. She had been my best friend for over a decade. My roommate in college, my maid of honor. The person who held my bouquet when I vowed forever. Her message was short. "I hope you find peace soon." I froze, then replied, "Why?" The typing dots pulsed. Then came the response. I've been talking to Celine. She reached out a while ago. She wanted to understand your side, Tanya. I thought, maybe I could help. Help? I typed back. By sharing my therapy sessions with her? There was a pause. Then she confirmed it. She asked questions. I answered them. I didn't let her finish. I saved the audio clip of the chat, forwarded it to my encrypted archive, and labeled it witness/collapse/proof. They weren't just taking my husband. They weren't just replacing my name on paperwork. They were taking my story, repackaging it, distributing it to people who used to be mine. I walked back to the dining room, set the last dish on the counter, and returned to the table where they sat, still sipping their wine. Before we finish, I said, lifting my glass, a quick toast. Rex looked up, surprised. Celine arched a brow. To the truth, I said calmly, whether whispered behind doors or posted for likes. Celine's wine caught in her throat. She coughed. Rex laughed nervously. I kept my eyes on them, steady. I'm glad we're all spending more time together, I continued. It's revealing. Rex shifted in his seat. Celine glanced at him, then at me. You okay, Tanya? He asked. Never better, I replied. There was a beat of silence. I tilted my head. Isn't it funny how people always assume the quiet ones don't have teeth? Celine set her glass down, visibly unsettled. I smiled and stood. Well, I should go tidy up, I said, walking toward the kitchen. Before turning the corner, I stopped, pulled a small USB stick from my pocket, and set it on the table. Feel free to review that when you're ready, I said over my shoulder. You'll recognize most of it. They didn't respond. I didn't need them to. I walked to the door, slipped on my jacket, and reached for the handle. As I opened it, I said loud enough for both of them to hear, Don't worry. I backed everything up to the cloud. Behind me, Celine called out, Backed what up? I didn't turn around. Dinner, conversations, lies, I said, just making sure I don't forget. Then I stepped into the night, leaving the smell of citrus and betrayal behind. The text came midweek, short and deliberately sweet. Let's all meet and clear the air. It's time to be a family again. Sunday at noon. Love, Mom. I read it twice before setting my phone down. Then I walked to the kitchen, made myself a cup of chamomile, and stood by the window, watching the wind sway through the backyard trees. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a summons. A performance, no doubt planned by Celine and Rex, probably pitched as a chance to make things right. I didn't respond. I simply began preparing. That Sunday, I dressed in beige flats and a dark gray blouse. No jewelry, no makeup. My hair pulled back in a plain twist. I wore neutrality like armor, nothing to distract from the documents in my bag or the truth I was prepared to deliver. The driveway to my mother's house was packed with familiar cars. I parked a little farther back, near the edge of the property, and stepped into the spring breeze with a leather satchel over one shoulder. Inside, a folder, a flash drive, a printed copy of my will, and 2 backup USBs, just in case. The yard was staged like a Norman Rockwell painting. Picnic tables under a white canopy, pitchers of lemonade, mason jars with sweet tea, brisket already steaming on platters. Someone even brought a tray of deviled eggs, my grandmother's recipe, though no one made them quite right. I walked in unnoticed at first, or rather, they noticed but pretended they didn't. Celine was already holding court near the table, laughing with Rex and a few cousins. My mother stood beside the grill, smiling a little too hard at a neighbor she barely tolerated. I didn't greet anyone. I didn't sit down. I waited. It didn't take long. Celine stood, clinking her glass with the edge of a spoon. Before we eat, she said, I just want to say something. I folded my arms across my chest, eyes fixed on her mouth. I know things have been tense lately, she continued, her voice honeyed with just enough breathiness to seem vulnerable. But families go through rough patches, and sometimes one person's pain spills out in ways that hurt others. She didn't name me. She didn't need to. Some people are just emotionally fragile, she said. It's not their fault. They don't realize how much they're affecting the people who love them. Gasps of agreement, quiet nods. No one interrupted. Then my mother chimed in. That's why we're here, to choose healing over resentment. Tanya, honey, we all just want to move forward. I smiled, held it there. Rex joined in with a half shrug. No matter what's said, we all know who's been holding this family together. Laughter, polite, polished, poisoned. They weren't forgiving me. They were crucifying me under a banner of unity. I remembered something Brené Brown once wrote. The truth doesn't cost anything, but a lie can cost you everything. I rose slowly, adjusted my blouse, and stepped into the center of the gathering. Well, I said calmly, since we're being honest today, I brought a few truths of my own. The air shifted, the kind of stillness that precedes a landslide. I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive, handing it to my cousin's husband, Mark, who'd brought his laptop for his son's school project. Do you mind? I asked. He hesitated. Sure. He plugged it in. No one moved. I nodded once. Play. First, kitchen footage. Rex and Celine. Intimate. Familiar. Voices affectionate. The clip was short but undeniable. Then, the living room recording. Rex's voice, low and cruel. She still thinks we're helping her feel less alone. Celine's reply, clear as daylight. I know how to play her better than she knows how to protect herself. A murmur broke through the crowd. My aunt gasped. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" Next, the TikTok. Celine's monologue about unstable sisters played full volume. Then, finally, a voice note. Sarah, my old bridesmaid, saying she'd shared therapy stories with Celine. I didn't think it would hurt anyone, she said in the clip. I was just trying to help. No voiceover, no narration, just proof. When the last file ended, silence swallowed the yard whole. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. Rex stared at his hands. Celine had gone pale, her posture suddenly small. I turned to face them all, my voice steady. This isn't vengeance, I said. This is balance. I looked at Rex. You signed away our marriage the moment you used my name to take out a loan for her. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. No, I said. Don't talk. Just listen. That's what you're all so good at pretending to do, right? I walked to the main table, placed the folder down, and added the flash drive beside it. You can keep the food, I said. I'm taking the truth. And I left. The walk to my car was long and silent, but my steps felt lighter than they had in weeks. With each stride, I could feel the weight shifting, off my chest, off my back, off the version of me they'd tried to bury. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving that I still existed, that I saw what they did, that I refused to disappear quietly. When I got into the car, I didn't start it right away. I sat there, let the silence settle. Not the same kind of silence I'd lived with in that house, but a new kind, one that held space instead of pressure. I opened my phone and sent an email to Carol. Subject, Phase 1 complete. Message, I'm ready for dissolution. That night, as I unloaded groceries in my apartment, I noticed a voicemail blinking on my phone. It was from my mother. I didn't know all of it, she said, voice low and shaking. We need to talk. I played it once, then deleted it. Then I walked into the bathroom, stared at my reflection for a while, and whispered, You didn't want to know. Maya Angelou once said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I'd read that quote years ago, but it never settled the way it did now, like a truth I'd ignored until it was too big to unsee. A week had passed since the family gathering. Since I laid out every ugly truth with the precision of a surgeon and watched my mother drop her fork like she'd been slapped. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was calculated. No one called. Not Celine, not Rex, not even my mother. The very people who once flooded my phone with guilt trips and questions now acted like I'd evaporated. It should have felt like a win. But silence, when it comes from people who used to demand your loyalty, isn't victory. It's exile. I moved through my days like someone floating underwater, functional but distant. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just noticed everything. How no one checked in. How the people I thought might text, cousins, old family friends, chose their comfort over the truth. I'd stopped asking for clarity. I had all the clarity I needed. I just didn't have closure. On Thursday morning, I got an email from Carol. Subject: urgent. Property update attached was a PDF, an amended version of my father's will. It listed Mercedes as the sole heir to the family cabin up north, our cabin. The one Dad promised would go to me, the one he walked me through during his last summer alive, saying, "One day this will be yours, T." I stared at the document. My name wasn't there. I called Carol immediately. "This was filed 3 months after your father's death," she said, voice tight. "It's legally suspect, but it's on the books." I could hear the hesitance in her voice. She didn't want to say what we both suspected. "Do you think it's forged?" I asked. "There's a chance," she replied. "But more likely, someone used his name while you were grieving." I didn't need a name. I had one already. My mother, of course, she had access. She had the paperwork. And she had Celine in her ear, crafting stories about me being too unstable, too angry, too emotionally fragile to manage real estate. "They forged more than documents," I whispered aloud. "They altered a legacy." I booked an appointment for a forensic analysis, printed out every message Dad ever sent me about the cabin, emails, birthday cards, notes scribbled in the margins of books he loaned me. I built a wall of his handwriting, preparing to prove that the last thing he gave me wasn't a lie. That Saturday, I drove to my childhood home. Not to argue, not to reclaim anything, just to collect what little was still mine. Mom answered the door with a polite smile. Her eyes darted behind me like she expected company. "It's just me," I said. She nodded, stepped aside. "Take what you need." No warmth. No questions. I walked past the hall photos, past the dusty piano I once played, and into the den. The bookshelf held albums stacked by year, labeled neatly, just like I remembered. I pulled a few down and opened the oldest one. The photos had changed. In one, I was cropped halfway out. In another, a family birthday banner had my name faded, almost blurred beyond recognition. Our wedding album, mine and Rex's, had been retouched. The cover photo now only showed him, leaning against a pillar. I wasn't there. Celine's baby photos filled center pages. Photos I didn't remember Mom ever developing. New frames, placed where mine used to sit. I flipped through the pages slowly, each one more surgical than the last. Even my graduation photo. Gone. "You erased me before I even left," I said aloud. Mom didn't respond right away. She was leaning against the doorway, arms folded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You chose to distance yourself," she replied flatly. I turned the page again. "No," I said. "You just made it easy." I found one album that still had me in full, age 7, in a green dress, holding a snow globe from Aunt Marlene. I tucked it under my arm. "That's all I need," I said. She didn't stop me, didn't ask to see me out. I drove from there directly to the cemetery. The sun was warm, the wind steady. I parked beneath the tree Dad always loved, the one he claimed had stood through every storm since the county was founded. His headstone was simple, just his name, the years, and the words, "Builder of roots, not walls." I sat down in the grass, opened the album, and laid it gently at the base of the stone. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, voice steady. "You saw what they were." I didn't cry. I didn't speak long. I just sat there, letting the memory of his voice sit beside me like it used to in silence. No explanations. No expectations. Eventually, I stood. "I'll stop looking for love in places that hurt," I said. "I promise you that." Back home, the apartment felt smaller, but it was mine. No one had touched the shelves. No one had moved my books. The coffee mugs still hung in order, alphabetized by city name, a quiet comfort. That evening, I made tea and settled onto the couch with a book. But before I could even flip the first page, a knock rattled the door. Not loud, not frantic, Just two firm knocks, followed by the sound of something slipping through the mail slot. I walked over and picked up a large white envelope. No return address. Inside, a letter. Typed, precise. From a private investigator I'd contacted months ago but never followed up with. It read, "Enclosed, you'll find documentation of financial accounts opened under your name by Rex and Mercedes. These accounts include savings, revolving credit, and investment portfolios, totaling $137,000 in funds misattributed to your Social Security number." The final sentence punched through my ribs. "Would you like to press charges?" I looked up at the ceiling, then at the door, then at my reflection in the glass. They weren't just done stealing my identity. They were about to learn what it felt like to be held accountable by the woman they'd erased. The envelope sat on my desk for hours before I opened it. I'd already read the investigator's summary through email, but holding the physical documents in my hands made it real in a different way. The kind of real you can't delete or archive or swipe away. It was thicker than I expected. Several pages stapled neatly together, along with a folded letter paperclip to the top. Old paper, yellowed slightly at the edges. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My father's, tight, slanted, and deliberate. His voice echoed in my head as I unfolded the note. "Tanya," it began, "if this ever reaches you, something has gone wrong. I wanted you to have this, only you, not because you need it, but because you've always stood alone." He explained that the account was tied to my Social Security number, but hidden under a bank trustee alias, meant only for me. Savings he'd set aside after Mom pushed him to shift the estate. "I didn't trust the paper trail," he wrote. "But I trust you." My throat tightened. It wasn't the money. It was knowing he'd seen it too. The way they leaned on Celine, molded her into something softer, more compliant. He knew I'd be erased if they had the chance. And from the grave, he'd laid down breadcrumbs just in case. The next document was notarized proof. The account was untouched, the beneficiary unchanged. And beneath it, a photocopy of his handwriting again, with 3 words underlined. "For Tanya only, no exceptions." I leaned back in my chair, breathing deep. This wasn't comfort, it was validation, and it was the weapon I needed. By noon, I was at the bank. The woman behind the desk scanned the documents, eyebrows lifting. She didn't ask questions. She verified the routing number, confirmed my ID, and gave me the current balance. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply nodded and requested a printed statement. Back in my car, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, gripping the wheel. Not with nerves, but with resolve. It was time to take my name back. I called Carol, my estate attorney. The line rang 4 times before her assistant picked up. "Hi, is Carol available?" The hesitation on the other end told me everything before she spoke. She's no longer representing your case." "No longer," I repeated. "She dropped it?" "She didn't give a reason," the assistant said quickly. "I'm sorry." I sat in silence for a moment, then I thanked her and hung up. There it was. The quiet power of Celine's reach. One more pulled string behind the scenes. I wasn't surprised. But I was ready. I pulled out my contacts list and called Marcy Nguyen, an attorney my friend from Seattle had connected me with weeks ago. We'd spoken briefly once. That was enough to know she was a no-nonsense woman who didn't blink when things got ugly. She answered on the second ring. "Marcy speaking." "It's Tanya," I said. "I'm ready to move forward." She didn't miss a beat. "Tell me everything. Start with the most recent breach." I walked her through the forged loan, the car title, the property will. I even mentioned the missing lawyer. Her response was crisp. "This isn't just divorce. This is a systematic dismantling of your identity. We build from the inside out." She laid out a plan. Immediate asset freeze on joint accounts, motion for a restraining order based on financial coercion, subpoena requests for all activity tied to Celine and Rex over the past 18 months. We'd expose everything, from credit applications to wire transfers. By the end of the call, I felt the ground under my feet again. Not soft, not steady, but mine. Later that day, I drove to the community center where I used to volunteer before all of this began. The director, Paula, hugged me without asking questions. She always did have good instincts. I didn't come to volunteer. I came to speak. They'd asked me a few months back to share my story for a women's resilience series. I'd said no at the time, too raw, too soon. But now I had a different kind of urgency. I stepped up to the mic in a small room filled with folding chairs and familiar faces. We always talk about healing in silence, I began. But sometimes silence is what kills. I didn't name names. I didn't cry. I just told the truth, stripped of drama, but not of impact. About what it feels like to be erased by the people who claim to love you. About what it means to claw your name back, inch by inch, from people who rewrote it without your permission. When I finished, the room was still. Then someone clapped, then another, then all of them. Afterward, I handed a printed version of my story, anonymized, to Paula in case the newsletter wanted to publish it. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said. At home that night, I recorded a video, not for social media, not for attention, just for me, a safeguard. "They tried to bankrupt me emotionally," I said to the camera, "but they only taught me how to audit pain." I saved it to my encrypted folder. That night, as I curled into bed, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Marcy. Subject: Immediate action required body. They're filing an emergency petition. Looks like retaliation. I'll handle it. Just stay ready. I stared at the screen, then typed, "Let them come. I've archived everything." I stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at the woman staring back at me. "You're not someone's ex-wife," I said. "You're the storm they'll remember. Sometimes peace looks like absence." The quote lingered in my mind that morning as I surveyed the quiet of my condo. I'd traded in the whirlwind of betrayal and court maneuvers for soft light drifting through sheer curtains and the gentle hum of distant traffic. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. And for the first time in months, it felt peaceful. No one called me anymore. Not Celine, not Rex, not even my mother. Not because they were busy or respectful, because I no longer existed in their story. Their erasure was total. My new place was modest, a one-bedroom rental near the lake, filled with books I chose to display, plants that breathed on their own terms, and my father's old records spinning quietly in the corner. No photos of them, no reminders of betrayal, just things I touched, chose, and felt connected to. Still, each morning I'd check my email, not hoping for messages from them, but to remind myself that I owned my narrative now. No one else could write it. I sat by the window, pen in hand, and watched a line of geese glide across the water. In the distance, a fisherman cast his line, patient and still. I closed my eyes and let the absence of expectation wash over me. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Jenna, an old coworker, barely a friend but kind enough. She'd sent me a group photo. I opened it quickly, surprised to see my face flashing on the screen. It was from some housewarming party, and I wasn't in the photo. There on the screen, my mother smiling, Rex raising a glass, my cousins gathered around, Celine in the center holding a charcuterie board. The caption, "To the new queen of the family." My fingers hovered over the screen. Not rage, not heartbreak. Something lighter. Relief. Their love was conditional enough to erase me publicly. If something that thin could vanish me so easily, I had never truly belonged. And that was freeing. I took a screenshot, labeled it "Why I Don't Go Back," and saved it to my archive. I opened my laptop and began drafting my final affidavit, organized, clear. Not just a legal record of fraud and theft, but an emotional testament. How I was manipulated, erased, and ultimately saved myself through boundaries, documentation, and clarity. At the end of the affidavit, I typed in bold, "I do not seek revenge. I seek clean space." I deleted Celine's number. I blocked Rex on every platform, social, email, even anonymous browsing sessions. I wanted neither outreach nor residue from their presence. Later, I took a walk downtown. Sun was low. Shadows stretched across the square. The benches glowed under golden light. Fountain water whispered. I passed a shop with handmade jewelry and stopped. Nothing fancy, just a delicate pendant on a simple chain. On impulse, I bought it. The saleswoman wrapped it carefully. I paid without second thoughts. On a bench by the fountain, I unclasped the pendant and held it in my palm. I thought, this is for the woman who stayed when everyone walked away. I pulled out my father's letter. Even from the grave, he left breadcrumbs. I read the last line again. You are not like them. Don't become them. He knew what I would need someday. I smiled. Healing didn't look like yelling or breakdowns. It looked like calm, like an unlocked door swinging open. It looked like learning self-love. Back at the condo, I opened my computer and started a blog post titled, How I Survived Being Rewritten. I wrote softly, not for sympathy, but for acknowledgement. I didn't name names. I spoke of silence, of rediscovery, of reclaiming identity, of writing yourself into history when someone else tries to erase you. By the time I hit publish, readers were already sending messages. I needed to hear this tonight. Your story is my story, and I needed to know I'm not alone. Thank you for not staying silent. I didn't reply individually. I just let the words sink in. I closed my eyes and thought, healing didn't look like confrontation. It looked like deletion. Because sometimes, letting go is the loudest thing you can do. Before bed, I added a line to the blog. I am not someone's daughter, wife, or rival. I am mine. That night, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a plain envelope on the mat. No stamps, no sender. Inside, a single photograph of me and my father, taken at age 10, in front of a field of sunflowers. My hand resting on his, and both of us smiling. A post-it stuck to the back read, He knew. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. No signature. I held it gently until the paper felt warm. Then, I tucked it into a wooden box on my shelf that held my father's watch and that sapphire bracelet. Sometimes the past knocks quietly, not to reopen wounds, but to check whether you're still listening. I am. Chapter 12. The cost of my silence was their collapse. Tôi ngồi bên ngoài tòa án quan Kootenai với một chiếc tháp hồ sơ màu vàng nhạt bên cạnh ghi chữ tay rõ, Final Strike. Trong lòng tấp là bằng chứng chắc chắn. Bạn phân tích pháp lý xác thực về hành vi lạm dụng danh tính, chiếm đoạt tài chính và giả mạo giấy tờ gia đình. Tất cả đã được nhóm pháp lý mới của tôi kiểm tra kỹ lưỡng. Có cả bản ghi âm, sao kê ngân hàng, bản kê biên bản pháp lý và các đoạn video ghi lại lời nói của kẻ gian. Tôi nhớ lại dòng chữ trong lá thư cuối cùng của cha tôi. Khi cô đứng lên, đứng chỉ bảo vệ, tấn công đi. Tôi hít một hơi thật sâu để sự giận dữ tích tụ nhưng lạnh lùng nhẹ nhàng lan tỏa trong cơ thể. Hôm nay, tôi không còn chiến đấu để có được kết thúc nữa. Tôi mang đến đây hậu quả. Tôi bước vào phòng xử án với vẻ mặt điềm tĩnh nhưng đầy uy lực. Không phải người bị ép buộc phải làm điều này. Tôi là người ra đòn. Mái tóc buông nhẹ, đôi mắt sáng. Tôi là phiên bản không thể bị chìm lấp dưới bất cứ điều gì nữa. Luật sư của tôi đứng lên trình bày. Ban kiểm toán pháp lý đã nêu rõ hàng loạt vi phạm. Những tài khoản chung bị thao túng, các khoản vay được xử lý bằng chữ ký giả mạo trống, bản sửa đổi di chúc của cha được thực hiện chỉ vài tháng sau khi ông mất. Cả Celine và Rex đều xuất hiện trong video được phát lên, giống cười lạnh lùng khi nói về sự ngu dốt của tôi, về cách họ biết chơi tôi hơn chính tôi bảo vệ mình. Celine cố phản đối, nhưng thẩm phán gõ búa một tiếng dứt khoát. Cô ta im lặng. Mắt Rex trắng bệch, miệng không nói nổi một từ. Tôi đứng dậy để phát biểu. Tôi không đến đây để được thương hại, tôi nói chắc nịch. Tôi đến để giải tỏa quyền lực của lời nói dối. Không một lời rơi lệ, chỉ sự rõ ràng đến lạnh người. Thẩm phán đọc lệnh, đóng băng tài sản ngay lập tức, mở hồ sơ hình sự vì tội giả mạo giấy tờ và chiếm đoạt tài sản thừa kế. Trong lòng, tôi biết mình không thắng những người họ từng là. Tôi đang chia sẻ cái giá họ phải trả vì sự tĩnh lặng của tôi. Phiên tòa kết thúc, tôi bước ra khỏi phòng xử án. Ánh nắng tháng 5 sọi lên gương mặt mọi người. Ngoài cửa, mẹ tiến lại, chưa khô nước mắt, nói nhỏ, con thật sự đã làm đến cùng. Tôi đáp lại nhẹ nhàng, mẹ đã đi qua con từ lâu rồi. Cô ấy cố ôm tôi, nhưng tôi không nhúc nhích. Cái ôm này đến quá muộn. Tôi rẽ sang bên, không vì ác ý, mà vì sự rõ ràng cuối cùng, sự chuộc lời dành cho người biết hỏi cãi. Còn mẹ, cô không hối tiếc, chỉ hỏi khi bị tóm. Tôi bước thẳng, không ngoảnh lại. Tôi xứng đáng với sự yên lặng này. Vài tuần sau, tôi chuyển tới căn hộ nhỏ, ấm áp hơn, gần phố cổ. Ánh đèn lấp lánh sau khung cửa lớn, tiếng chuông xe đạp, lẫn hương cà phê từ quán góc. Căn nhà chỉ toàn những thứ tôi tự chọn, cây xanh, tranh vẽ, quyển sách yêu thích, địa thần cha tôi để lại và ánh sáng tự do bay qua khung cửa sổ. Tôi nộp đơn đổi lại hộ mẹ, tôi trở thành Tanya, hộ mẹ, người tôi vốn là. Tôi nhận một lời mời làm bán thời gian cho một tổ chức phi lợi nhuận chuyên giúp phụ nữ vượt qua lạm dụng tài chính, một cộng đồng khôn ngoan, ấm áp. Tôi cũng đăng tải blog của mình, dưới tên thật. Câu chuyện về sự hồi phục không phải thất bại, về sức mạnh khi im lặng đúng lúc và kêu lên khi im lặng trở thành nỗi đau. Bài viết lan truyền, tin nhắn đến như mưa từ phụ nữ nói, câu chuyện của bạn cứu tôi không giận hay nhận vinh quang, chỉ mỉm cười, vì tôi đã trở thành hình ảnh rõ ràng của điều gì đáng sống. Tôi mở nhật ký, viết dòng cuối. Họ biến tôi thành vô hình, nhưng tôi đã trở nên không thể bị bỏ qua. Đêm đó, trên bàn có một bức thư là, không để, chỉ ghi tay. Con đã cho nhiều người hy vọng hơn con biết. Cảm ơn vì không im lặng. Tôi không nhớ ai gửi, nhưng nụ cười nảy sinh trong lòng. Tôi đặt nó vào chiếc hộp gỗ cùng với anh cha tôi và bản quyết định tòa án, nơi tôi lưu giữ những chung tích hồi sinh. Tôi đóng nạp, lẩm bẩm, tôi không cần họ biết sự thật, tôi chỉ cần họ sống với nó. Bởi lẽ, sự thật không phóng thích tôi, chính tôi đã phóng thích mình.